Hello everyone, you just caught me having a sip of my coffee. Ash Playstead here, a trading psychology master coach. Welcome to episode 22 of the Trading Psychology and Mindset Show, formerly known as the Mindset Reflexology Show. We're focusing and zeroing in tightly on all things trading psychology and mindset to help you build the right mind, the right brain for trading success. It's June the 15th. It is the depth of winter here in Southeast Australia. I hope wherever you are, Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, morning, day or evening, you're doing well, that your trading is good and your health and wellness is good also, and the weather is kind to you. Now, in this episode, when I did the promotional post for this episode, I spoke about the lies that our brain tells us. And I titled it, Your Trading Account Doesn't Lie, But Your Brain Does. So I'll dive into this in a minute. As usual, I've got my show notes in front of me, which I'll be reading from to make sure we hit all the important nuggets of gold that I want to hit. But just before I get started, I had a couple of questions sent to me about what do I mean the brain lies? Well, it's not so much even that the brain lies, it's that everything that your brain has been trained to do through evolutionary biology, lived experience, your societal upbringing, all of those things, your brain develops what is called the survival mechanism, the fight-flight mechanism, which receives data through all of our senses from the external environment, feeds in instantly into our brain system, which I've explained how that works previously. That information is instantly processed and assessed as threat or not. If it's a threat, you're instantly triggered to survival mode, which is attack or run away or occasionally freeze. Now, so this is something that is good and has helped us survive, but in trading, it's the big lie, right? It's the big lie that the brain is telling us you need to act emotionally. Your emotions get triggered to keep you alive in that moment of trading. And this is the great paradox. And I think personally that this is where most traders fall over. So let's dive in. Probably where I would start is the way that trading is presented to most people when they're looking into it and saying, is this the career path I want to follow? Is this something that I want to do? Now, this concerns me greatly because of what's being ignored, that being the trader's mindset. And people get really caught up in saying, this is really a probability thing, but if you follow certain rules and if you do all this stuff, everything's going to be fine. And yet what we discover is that mental self-mastery is the missing link. There's plenty of people who know how to trade. In fact, I think I could train a monkey on a stick how to trade. So a lot of people have that technical analysis down pat. They've got rules. And if we lived in a perfect world, everything would be functional. Everybody would be making money. But, and here's a big but, then performance under pressure exposes the trader's belief system. Now, what we find out there is the mind that they're bringing into the moment of managing uncertainty. That's when things blow up. That's when the lies get revealed, right? And what we've traditionally done as human beings, the brain creates lies, alibis, excuses, explanations, rationalizations that we convince ourselves of as to why we act that way. Well, this has got to be turned upside down in trading, because ultimately there's a huge difference between paper trading where there's no risk and real trading where there is risk, real, tangible, palpable risk, and where you're putting real money at risk and you may lose. Ah, yes, welcome. As a matter of fact, in trading, what you discover is the high likelihood that you're going to lose any given trade. So what you're really doing in trading is you're seeing the beliefs you have about your management of uncertainty being revealed and projected onto the screen of the markets. That's what you're really doing. And it's kind of like, what you find in trading is, once you grasp this and you start noticing that there's a gap between your knowledge and the way you actually perform paper trading and your performance under pressure, that's when you begin to realize, aha, what have I been denying about myself that I need to look at and is being right now revealed in my trading account, the ultimate truth meter. I hope that makes sense. So as I said at the start of this show, the trading account, your trading account doesn't lie. No matter what lies, alibis, excuses that you come up with, that your rational brain comes up with, your account will never lie. It shows exactly how competent your belief system is around managing uncertainty. And if you didn't have that, imagine if you didn't have that account there as your truth meter, your brain just continues to create all sorts of these alibis and explanations that keep you stuck in the mind that you brought to trading. So what we need to do is flip that and recognize that the problem is that the mind that is brought to trading, which we'll talk about in a few moments, isn't fit for trading. I'm going to give you an example. Now, when you're paper trading, pretty much what you're doing is you're playing a video game. I used to play a lot of video games as a youth, growing up in the 70s and 80s. And when you're playing video games, after everything goes up and down and you play the video game, whether you're killed or not, whether you're destroyed or not, guess what? You can always hit the reset button, and there you go. So pinball, despite it being, considered by parents of that era as being a bad thing, it actually did teach you a lot of skills. But one of the things it didn't teach is that if you lose, there's no reset button. This is what happens in real trading. The huge difference is there is no reset button. So it's the same as playing a video game, trading, but with one huge difference. It's real. And when you take a loss, it triggers the primitive emotional brain into instinctual responses to threat. Your evolutionary response mechanism kicks in, okay? So ultimately, whether you like it or not, the emotional brain, which I often call caveman brain, some people call reptilian brain, mammalian brain, is your silent partner. And this is where it gets really weird. It's that emotional brain is looking to solve the problem of short-term survival. That is all it is looking for. It doesn't care how it solves it. It's not thinking about it. It's just acting. Stimulus response, stimulus response. Now, let's say you take a loss, okay? You take a loss, and the next time you take a series of losses, and it becomes really clear that your limbic system needs to be able to trigger an emotional response to the threat of loss. That's the way the primitive brain sees it. It may take several different directions at this point. Now, the first direction, obvious one at that, if it can stop you from getting into the trade itself, it's won. It's not thinking long-term probability, it's thinking about immediate survivability. And if you don't get into the trade, risking capital, you're not a threat to yourself, so it just wipes you out. And that would be what we would call avoidance of fear. Now, a different direction, on the other hand, we might see what we would call the aggression of anger. You take a loss, you get a little peeved, a little annoyed. You feel that welling up inside you. Then you take another loss, and you take another loss. All of a sudden, you're going to make that money back. You're going to show them. You're going to show the market. You're going to make the market pay. Now, as childish as that sounds, honestly, have you ever felt like that before? That instinctual aggression of paying the market back. It's not going to show you. You're going to show it. What you're really doing is you're saying, that saber-toothed tiger that's attacking my clan, I'm going to make him pay. I'm going to show him. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm going to attack. I'm going to use my spears, some men, and I'm going to attack him. That's the way the primitive brain thinks. And you've still got that primitive brain underneath this thin layer, which we call the thinking brain. Now, when you get it all grown up, all of a sudden that primitive brain is now trading, right? And when it sees a loss, it's straight back in caveman days. It's back with a saber-toothed cat. That's what you've got. That's what you're dealing with. So the key is, think to yourself, okay, I've got an emotional brain. I've got that limbic system, caveman brain. That is going to always act on instinct. And that instinct is really problem solution, stimulus response. Now, we should note here that there, as I said earlier, there is no rational thinking in this process. It is just problem solution, stimulus response. And that's where it becomes a habit. It becomes an automatic habit that's running underneath the radar of our thinking brain. It doesn't even know the thinking brain's there, so it's just poof, it's gone like that. So ultimately, the very first thing that's going to have to happen is you're going to have to learn how to disrupt and cool down, calm down the circuits of that caveman brain. That's the first thing. And I teach emotional regulation on how to do this, because we know that an emotion is biological. From a neurobiological standpoint, an emotion is what is called a biological action potential and has nothing to do with psychology. That's where most people have it wrong. Emotions are biological, not psychological. They take over psychology. So it's these BAPs, these biological action potentials, that take over the mind in their attempt to coordinate action with the environment to stay alive in the environment. That's what trading is to your emotional brain. You're in an environment where you're forcing it to stay alive. So you've got that right, and you say to yourself, the first thing I have to do is I have to regulate that emotion. And to do that, we focus on breathing as a function, as a part of the signature of that emotion. And we also focus on muscle tension as a function of that emotion. And I'll quote one of the famous people in the history in this area, called Herbert Benson. You may have heard of him, and he's the guy that came up with what's called the relaxation response. What you learn with that is that you can disrupt the stressor, that threat, that, oh my God, I could lose here, or I have to make up for prior losses. You can disrupt it, and you can say, I can supply the relaxation response instead. It's because breathing diaphragmatically, which is breathing into the lower lobes of the lung, causes you to calm down. It redirects the oxygen back to the brain and away from the major muscles, which is what happens in fight flight. Anger and fear require a restriction in the way you breathe, which is why you breathe shallow and fast, or hold your breath and get tense. That is your body getting aroused, ready for action. Hello, Nestle. I really appreciate your kind comments and your kind support. It's so lovely to see you. Thanks for coming along. So what happens with the relaxation response, emotional regulation? You are regulating the intensity of the emotion so that it doesn't spill over, it doesn't flow over and become that feeling state and take over the mind. Now, that's super important. If we can't do that, we can't take the next step. Right? But it is still only just the start, folks, and it's not nearly enough. What's required next is mindfulness, applied mindfulness, I would call it, where you literally begin to build the observer of self. What you discover in mindfulness right off the bat here is that you and your thoughts are not the same. You and your thoughts are not the same. You are not having thoughts. They're actually having you. You don't have beliefs. They are having and creating your experience. And that's the deal here, folks. You begin to observe that and you begin to say, wow, what I am is a particular organization of my potential that the limbic system created as a survival-based force in the environment. Yep, I'll say that again. What I am is a current particular organization of my potential that the limbic system created as a survival force in the environment. And it did a great job in another time and another place. But the problem with trading in particular is that trading is a really bad place to try to use that certainty of survival as a basic modus operandi. It has to become a probability-based mind. This is where the work is. And therein, of course, lies the trouble. But the thing about mindfulness and observation is, you begin to see at the self, this thing that you call you, me, I, is actually just an organization of your potential that was done in another time and another place for short-term survival. And it's done a great job. I'll say that repeatedly. And of course, now it's hooked into habit on an instinctual level. It automatically fires without thinking brain approval and wipes out the thinking brain. And in trading, this is deadly. This is one of the lies that the brain tells us as traders that we've got to deal with. It then takes over your psychology. It takes over your reason. And there you are making all those dumb, stupid mistakes that you say, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? This is a probability game. Well, guess what? Nobody told caveman brain that, and he is not listening, or she's not listening. And so what we really want to do then is we begin to see the self as potential. And what we're recognizing is that potential got shaped in a particular way that we need to deconstruct so that we can move the self back into this moment of being where you can progress to being the designer of the mind that you're building to engage uncertainty. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Now, is this natural? No. Is it possible? Yes. But you really, truly have to begin to say, well, what are the potentialities? So we can look at a couple, right? The way I teach this is in the organized self that you are, that you bring to trading, right? What we're looking for is a fear-based thinking, anger-based thinking, greed-based thinking, and particularly lust or euphoria-based thinking, right? This is what's going on. Now, lust or euphoria in particular, and I'm not talking about sexual arousal here. You would know lust as things like jumping into things, wanting money, and you really begin to say, oh my God, I just had so much. I just jumped into the trade, right? That is lust, right? Thinking about winning, thinking about having things, thinking about getting what you want. So what you're saying is, okay, it's not natural, but this is what nature did to me. It allowed me to survive, but it's not allowing me to thrive in a probability world. So we want to reorganize that committee of the mind. And what I ask of you is to begin to think of your mind as not a singular unit. You've had all that experience of that inner commentary that's kind of just gas bagging away in the background, having opinions, having assessments, mostly negative, about potentialities. Well, that's just part of the mind, but that's not you. That's just one element, one committee member of that mind. And there are so much more. Besides, that limbic way of anger, fear, lust, and greed, there is also potential to organize your mind. Now, listen closely to this, around discipline, around courage, around self-soothing, and around impartiality when exposed to stress. Yeah, they're the things we want to build our mind around. That's the reformed committee we need to build. Now, you can do this. There will always be a struggle. This is one of the things we have to be honest. There will always be a struggle. That is implicit in our human nature, okay? Nothing can change about that. And there will always be uncertainty. There will always be the challenge of winning and losing, survival. However, what you have control over is the mind that you bring to the engagement of that struggle, that uncertainty. This is the dragon slaying you need to do. And I did a post yesterday about that inner dragon that we all have, that is that inner critic, that survival-based mind, that fear-based mind that's always, always, always chipping away at us. That is the dragon we need to slay. That will always be there. There will always be challenges, whether or not just in trading or in general life. There will always be the challenge that you can't control the outcome of those, but you can control the mind that engages them. You can control the performance mind that leads to the probability-based mind. Now, this is the future of success if you want it. You can start building that future self, a potential self that is very, I would say, radically different in the way that it approaches uncertainty. You can have the old historical mind, that one that you brought along. That's not going to work in trading, right? Or you can build the new potential performance in uncertainty-based mind, okay? That's the choice here. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, but with training, you see the future. I hope you can see the future listening to this, and you can start organizing yourself for that future, organizing the mind for that future. And you know what? Before you know it, if you do the work, you can have those habituated responses to uncertainty built in rather than the historical ones that evolution gave you. We know this, that we can reshape our brain. It's very plastic. And you can become designer of the self. You can build your new way of reflexing, which of course I call mindset reflexology, this new way of reflexing to the stress of performance in the moment. So, I invite you to come and investigate this further, to really, really look at it, to take a deeper approach, to begin to understand, I see. I really want you to have that aha moment, that it's about recognizing who I am in the current form of self, and then recognizing who I can potentially be when I learn how to rebuild the self. Yep, 100% that is where it's at. And that's what we're talking about, folks. As you move into this new financial year, the 22-23 financial year, I ask you to really begin to think about this. It's really about your mind state and really building it so that it's built for uncertainty. And to recognize that that is the difference between knowledge and actual experience and performance, okay? All the knowledge in the world isn't going to get past the instinctual nature of your emotional brain. It has to be trained. It has to be trained. And this is where, as I have said before, 95% or thereabouts of traders don't make it through this first few weeks, months, or years because they, one, can't accept that what they believe to be true isn't true in trading, or two, they accept it, but they aren't prepared to do the work, or three, they're prepared to do the work, but not for long enough, or they don't get the right help, right? So that's what we want to do. We want to build that new potential self, and no matter how successful it was in the past, it's not going to serve you in trading. Now, it's always your choice, friends. Now, no matter what, I wish you the best, okay? If I can help you, come explore more, come to my YouTube channel, trading psychology and mindset. Take a look at this stuff. I've got lots of videos on there. I'll keep recording more and start really going, how do I develop a potential self? How do I go down the path of self-mastery? Okay, now you're talking. Please take care. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'll see you again next week on the Trading Psychology and Mindset Show. That'll be the 22nd of June, the winter solstice in the Southern Hemisphere, or the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. It's one of my favorite days of the year. As I said, wherever you may be, have a terrific day, a terrific week. Stay well, trade well, and I'll see you on the next episode.